Welcome back. Today, we're jumping right into a pretty mind-bending look at animal behavioral ecology. We're going to unpack the deep, totally invisible forces that dictate almost every single wildlife encounter you've ever had in your life.
So picture this scenario, because I am sure you've experienced it at some point. You're just walking through a forest, minding your own business. Out of nowhere, a bird just explodes out of the trees. A deer freezes, stares at you with these eyes the size of dinner plates, and then just bolts like it suddenly remembered a really important appointment. And a squirrel, well, it does that thing where it runs 3 steps, stops, runs 3 steps, stops. It's basically having a full-blown existential crisis simply because you exist. And where are you in all this? You're just standing there in your hiking boots, completely harmless, peacefully eating a granola bar.
Okay, let's dive into this. Why exactly are these creatures so utterly terrified of us? Honestly, it doesn't make a lot of sense on the surface, right? I mean, we are talking about animals equipped with razor-sharp claws, deadly venom, massive horns, and blazing speed. And yet, they are terrified of us, these soft, slow, mostly hairless apes who, let's be real, frequently get winded just climbing 2 flights of stairs. It is a profound evolutionary mystery. And the answer goes way deeper than you might think. To figure this out, we've got to look way, way back in time. See, our Paleolithic ancestors were what behavioral ecologists call persistence hunters. Now, we definitely weren't the fastest predators on the savanna, not by a long shot, but we had a strategy that was arguably much more terrifying. We literally just kept going. Imagine being a gazelle. You look back and see this weird bipedal creature in the distance just jogging after you at a medium pace. And they do this for hours in the midday heat, until you literally collapse from exhaustion. It was genuinely horrifying. The animals that didn't run from the human silhouette, well, they got eaten. The ones that did run survived. Over thousands and thousands of generations, this relentless process baked a literal survival algorithm of human fear directly into animal DNA. Now, what's really interesting about this is a pretty wild concept known as the super predator theory. Back in 2016, a team of researchers at the University of Western Ontario published this study with a really bold claim. They argued that humans are the ultimate super predator. Now, this doesn't just mean that we hunt a lot. It means that we are feared by other apex predators significantly more than they fear each other. And the way they proved this was just fascinating. They set up audio equipment out in the wild and played recordings to local predators. But here's the kicker. They didn't play the sounds of roaring lions or howling wolves. No, they just played the sound of humans having a casual conversation, like the exact kind of mundane chatter you'd hear while waiting at a bus stop. And the results? Absolutely remarkable. Apex predators like mountain lions, animals that literally kill deer for breakfast, they fled at more than twice the rate they did from other predator sounds. Bobcats, skunks, possums, they all bolted faster and harder from folks just chatting about their weekend plans than from any actual natural threat. So, you might be wondering, why on earth does our casual presence trigger such a massive panic response? Well, it all comes down to predictability. Think about the contrast here. Animal predators follow very, very strict patterns. A wolf hunts at dawn and dusk. A crocodile ambushes near the water's edge. Prey animals have evolved for millions of years to read these natural patterns to survive. But human predators, we break literally all the rules. We hunt in the morning, at night, in massive groups, or totally alone. We use traps, spears, rifles, drones. We hunt on land, in the water, from helicopters. To an animal's brain, there is absolutely no pattern to us. We are this chaotic variable they just can't solve. And when you can't solve a variable in nature, the only rational response is maximum avoidance at all times. We completely break their algorithm. Now hold on, I know exactly what you are thinking. What about the city pigeons that would literally rather die than move out of your way on the sidewalk? Or, those raccoons that look you dead in the eyes while eating your garbage? Okay, this brings us to a key concept called habituation. When animals are repeatedly exposed to a stimulus, which in this case is us, without experiencing any negative consequences, their brain gradually reduces that fear response. Basically, the animal's brain realizes, hey, this weird ape thing keeps showing up, nothing bad happens, I'm wasting precious energy being scared. So they downgrade the threat level. Urban animals have gone through this over generations, essentially unlearning that factory-installed fear. But some animals take this whole interaction to a completely different, honestly slightly terrifying level. Take crows, for example. They don't just habituate to humans, they actively recognize individual human faces. Studies have shown that if you cross a crow, it will remember you. specifically you. It will harass you for years, it will actually recruit other crows to join in on the harassment, and it'll even teach its young that you, personally, are dangerous. So not only have they lost their baseline fear of us, they've essentially developed this whole culture of human surveillance. They're literally keeping detailed mental notes on us. The fact that fear can be unlearned completely proves that this isn't just some permanent factory setting. And we see the ultimate proof of this in island experiments. In places where humans have never been or have been absent for super long periods, animals show almost zero fear. I mean, when Charles Darwin arrived in the Galapagos Islands back in the 1830s, he could literally push marine iguanas into the sea, and they would just calmly swim back and sit right next to him. Today, researchers down in Antarctica constantly have to fend off these super curious penguins who just want to inspect their cameras and backpacks. When we aren't a historical threat, the fear just dissolves. And this brilliantly illustrates a massive ecological concept called the landscape of fear. It shows how the invisible force of fear itself actually reshapes entire ecosystems. Let's look at Yellowstone National Park. When wolves were reintroduced in 1995, the deer population didn't just decrease, the deer fundamentally changed their behavior. Out of pure fear, they avoided grazing in the open valleys. Because they vacated those areas, the vegetation came back. With the trees and shrubs returning, bird species rebounded. And incredibly, rivers actually changed course because the new root systems slowed down bank erosion. Just think about that. Fear itself was driving massive ecosystem change. Now take that exact same landscape of fear and apply it to humans. We are a global ecological force, and our presence has a staggering impact. Check this out. A major 2018 study published in Science found that across 6 entire continents, 6, mammals are literally shifting their daily schedules to become nocturnal. They're switching to the night shift not because their habitats are destroyed, but simply to avoid human presence. Let that sink in. Our mere existence is enough to completely rewire the daily awake schedules of wildlife across the entire planet. There's also another slightly uncomfortable reason why we trigger such intense fear, and it has to do with how we smell. Yeah, to an animal, human scent is a genuinely potent, terrifying chemical signal. Researchers actually conducted a test where they left scent strips soaked in human sweat near wildlife cameras. And the results? The reduction in local wildlife activity was comparable to leaving strips soaked in mountain lion urine. Literally just existing, just giving off the odor of being a living, breathing human, makes you roughly as scary to local wildlife as an apex predator actively marking its territory. So, the crucial point is this. If animals are so deeply instinctively terrified of us, why do they sometimes attack? It's really important to demystify this. Aside from a few genuine exceptions, like polar bears, who, by the way, evolved with essentially no natural predators and clearly never got the memo to fear bipedal creatures, animal attacks are almost always desperate, defensive reactions. Attacks generally happen when an animal feels cornered with absolutely no escape route, or maybe a mother is fiercely protecting her offspring, or extreme stress from habitat destruction forces them into close, terrifying proximity with humans. They aren't acting out of malice, right? They are reacting out of sheer desperation. To really grasp just how much we've changed the natural dynamic, you have to look at accounts of first contact. When early explorers encountered animals that had absolutely zero previous exposure to humans, there was just no fear. The famously extinct dodo bird was so utterly fearless that they would literally just walk right up to the sailors. The exact same thing goes for isolated deep-sea creatures being brought up for the first time today. It really proves that a world without this intense, baked-in fear of humans absolutely once existed, long before our evolutionary arms race really escalated. Which brings us to a slightly uncomfortable philosophical corner. The fear that animals have of us isn't some glitch in the matrix. It isn't a mistake. It is an entirely correct read of the situation. Honestly, when you look at our history, driving hundreds of species to extinction, destroying more than half of all natural habitats on Earth, and dramatically altering the global climate, the animals that decide to just turn and run away from us are, statistically speaking, making the absolute smartest possible choice for their own survival. But here is the cruelest irony of this whole landscape of fear. Because animals flee and hide from us so incredibly effectively, we go out into nature and it looks perfectly peaceful to us. We interpret the absence of animals as this beautiful tranquility, when in reality, nature is actually fleeing from us. This fear creates this invisible wall that actively works against conservation. The most traumatized wildlife populations are the ones hiding the best, which makes them incredibly difficult for scientists to study, understand, and ultimately protect. Let's move to and see how this builds into something a bit more hopeful. Because the landscape of fear is learned, it means it can actually be dismantled. One of the absolute best examples of this is the mountain gorilla tourism programs over in Rwanda and Uganda. Through incredibly careful, consistent, and highly respectful habituation work, researchers have documented gorilla groups that went from fleeing rangers on site to completely tolerating human observers in just a few short years. They realized that these specific humans in this specific place brought absolutely no negative outcomes. They updated their mental models. So the next time you look out the window and see a squirrel having a full-on crisis on your lawn, just remember, it isn't being dramatic. It's running a highly refined survival program cultivated over hundreds of thousands of years. But here's the thing. The incredible human intelligence and adaptability that made us so frightening to begin with is the exact same trait that allows us to actively choose to act differently. We have the capability to dismantle the landscape of fear, but it requires us to be consistently and provably safe. So the final question we really have to ask ourselves is this: will we continue to let our sheer presence be a global threat, or will we use our unique capabilities to consciously choose to be a reliably safe presence on this planet? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.